Firekeeper's circle. I never feared the forest. Never had a reason to. Growing up in rural Pennsylvania, the woods were my escape. A place where I could disappear from the noise of town, from people, from the endless demands of modern life. Out there, it was just you, the trees, and silence so thick you could almost taste it. That weekend in late October, I drove 3 hours north to the Allegheny National Forest. No cell service, no plan, just me, my backpack, and a craving for solitude. I parked at a remote trailhead just after noon, shouldered my gear, and headed into the forest without bothering to check the map. I'd been hiking these mountains for 15 years. I knew what I was doing, or so I thought. The afternoon passed in a blur of amber sunlight filtering through the canopy, the earthy smell of decaying leaves, the rhythmic crunch of my boots on the trail. I walked for hours, letting my mind empty out. No destination, no timeline, just movement. By the time I noticed the light fading, it was too late. I checked my watch. 5:47 p.m. Sunset shouldn't have been for another half hour, but the forest had gone dark. Not gradually, but all at once, like someone had thrown a switch. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in what felt like seconds. My breath came out in visible clouds. I stopped, turned in a slow circle, and felt the first flutter of unease in my chest. The trail was gone. Not overgrown or hard to follow, gone. I was standing in a clearing I didn't remember entering, surrounded by identical pine trees that seemed to lean inward, watching. The GPS on my watch showed nothing but a spinning icon. No signal, no coordinates, just a blank screen. Okay, I said aloud, just to hear something besides the silence. Okay, no problem. Set up camp. Wait till morning. Easy. My voice sounded flat, swallowed by the trees. I scanned the clearing for a good spot to pitch my tent, and that's when I saw it. A campfire. A proper one, burning clean and hot in the center of the clearing. The logs were arranged in a perfect teepee structure, the kind of setup you'd see in a wilderness survival manual. Flames licked upward in the windless air, casting dancing shadows across the tree line. But there was no one around. No tent, no gear, no sign anyone had ever been there except for that fire, burning bright and steady as if it had been waiting for me. I approached slowly, every instinct screaming at me to turn around and walk. No, run, in any direction. But it was getting colder by the minute, and that fire was warm and real and impossible to resist. "Hello," I called out. "Anyone here?" Nothing, just the soft crackle of burning wood. I circled the fire twice, examining the ground. The dirt was damp from recent rain, perfect for holding tracks. And there they were, footprints, bare feet, adult-sized, maybe a men's 11 or 12. They approached the fire from the north side of the clearing, then simply stopped. No prints leading away, no indication the person had walked anywhere else. It was as if they'd stood there, in that exact spot, and then vanished into thin air. The rational part of my brain, the part that had gotten me through college, through a divorce, through the death of my father, offered explanations. A ranger checking on an old fire ring. A homeless person living off the grid. Hell, maybe some bushcraft YouTuber filming content. But the other part of my brain, the ancient part that remembers when humans were prey, whispered something different. Run. I didn't run. I was tired. It was dark. And I'd be damned if I was going to stumble through an unfamiliar forest in the middle of the night. So I did what any reasonable person would do in that situation. I made a series of catastrophically bad decisions. I set up my tent 20 feet from the fire. I boiled water for freeze-dried beef stroganoff. I even pulled out my flask and took a long pull of whiskey, trying to convince myself this was all perfectly normal. That's when I heard the rustling. Soft at first, just a whisper of movement in the underbrush to my left. I turned, aimed my headlamp into the darkness, and saw nothing but trees and shadows. Probably a deer, I muttered. The rustling came again, this time from behind me. I spun around. Nothing. Then from my right, my left, behind me again, closer now. Something was circling me. I grabbed my knife, a fixed-blade Mora that had gutted more fish than I could count, and stood with my back to the fire. The heat felt good against my spine, but the rest of me had gone cold with a fear I hadn't felt since childhood. "I'm armed," I shouted into the darkness. "I don't want any trouble." The rustling stopped. In the sudden silence, I heard something worse. Breathing. Slow and measured, just beyond the reach of the firelight. Not the panting of an animal, but the deliberate inhalations of something that wanted me to know it was there. I should have run then, should have grabbed my pack and sprinted in any direction. But fear has a way of rooting you in place, of convincing you that staying still is the same as staying safe. I sat back down by the fire, knife in hand, and waited. Minutes passed, maybe an hour. The fire continued to burn with the same steady intensity, never seeming to consume the logs. I kept glancing at the woodpile, counting the pieces, trying to remember if that branch on top had been there before. It hadn't. Something was adding wood to the fire while I wasn't looking. My hands started to shake. I gripped the knife tighter, knuckles white, and forced myself to take slow breaths. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Stay calm, stay rational. That's when I noticed the shadows. They were wrong. The fire cast my shadow across the ground, stretched and distorted, which was normal. But there were other shadows too. Human-shaped silhouettes that didn't correspond to any trees or rocks. They stood at the edge of the firelight, perfectly still, as if painted onto the darkness. I counted them. 6, no 7. No. I'd lost count because they kept shifting, rearranging themselves while my eyes weren't directly on them. "What do you want?" I asked, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. One of the shadows moved. Not walked, moved. It glided forward, separating itself from the tree line, taking on depth and substance as it entered the firelight. It looked human, roughly. The proportions were almost right, the height about 6 feet, but something was off in a way I couldn't immediately place. It moved with a strange, fluid grace, like footage of a person played back at the wrong speed. And its face, Jesus Christ, its face. Where there should have been eyes, nose, mouth, there was only smooth, featureless darkness. Not skin, not a mask, but an absence. A void that seemed to swallow light. It crouched down on the opposite side of the fire, tilted its head, and watched me. Couldn't move, couldn't breathe, could only stare at this impossible thing as it reached out one too long arm and carefully placed another log on the fire. The flames surged higher, eager, hungry, and then it smiled. Not with a mouth, it didn't have a mouth, but I felt it smile, the way you can feel someone staring at the back of your neck. The darkness where its face should have been rippled with something like amusement. My paralysis broke. I grabbed my pack and dove into my tent, fumbling with the zipper. My hands felt like they belonged to someone else, clumsy and slow. I finally got the zipper up and collapsed inside, breathing in ragged gasps. The tent fabric was thin, cheap nylon I'd bought on sale at REI. I could see the shadow of the fire through it, the dancing shapes of flames, and something else. A silhouette standing right outside, inches from the fabric. It stood there for what felt like hours, not moving, not making a sound, just waiting. I pressed my back against the far wall of the tent, knife held out in front of me like it would do any good against whatever that thing was. My breath came in short, sharp bursts. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might burst. Then I heard it. A voice, dry as autumn leaves, soft as wind through grass, speaking directly into my ear despite the fabric barrier. "You shouldn't have stayed." I screamed, couldn't help it, and burst out of the tent. The fire was gone. Not burned out, not reduced to embers. Gone. The ground where it had been was dry and cold, without even a trace of ash. If I hadn't known better, I would have said there had never been a fire there at all. But the footprints remained. Dozens of them now, bare feet pressed deep into the damp earth, circling my tent in concentric rings. They spiraled inward, tighter and tighter, until they reached the tent's entrance and stopped. I played my flashlight across the clearing and saw them. The shadows, but not shadows anymore, figures. Substantial, three-dimensional, standing between the trees at the clearing's edge. There had to be 20 of them, maybe more, all with that same featureless void where their faces should be. All perfectly still, all watching. They formed a complete circle around me. The flashlight beam swept across them, and I noticed something that made my stomach drop. They cast no shadows of their own. The light passed right through them as if they were made of smoke. I took a step backward, toward my tent. They didn't move. Another step. Still nothing. I was about to make a run for it, Fuck the tent, fuck the gear, just sprint into the forest and hope I could outrun whatever these things were. When my flashlight flickered, once, twice, the batteries were fresh. I put them in that morning. They shouldn't have been dying. The light dimmed, turned yellow, died to an ember glow, and I heard that voice again. Not from one direction but from all around me. A chorus of whispers that seemed to come from the earth itself. We don't like it when strangers use our fire. I didn't know. I shouted into the darkness. I'm sorry. I'll leave. I'll leave right now. Too late, they whispered. You've warmed yourself at our hearth. You've taken our hospitality. Now you belong to us. The flashlight gave one final flicker and died, plunging me into absolute darkness. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. Couldn't see the trees. Couldn't see the figures that I knew were closing in. I felt them before I saw them. Cold air on my skin, like standing in front of an open freezer. The smell of damp earth and rot. Fingers, if they were fingers, brushing against my jacket, my hair, my face. And then, impossibly, I saw light. Not from my flashlight. Not from the moon or stars. It was the fire, burning again in the center of the clearing. But it was different now. The flames were blue-white, cold-looking, and they cast no heat. By its light, I could see the figures clearly for the first time. They weren't human, had never been human. They were something older, something that had learned to wear a human shape the way you might wear a Halloween costume. Their proportions were wrong, arms too long, legs that bent at strange angles, heads that sat at impossible angles on their necks. And they were closing in. I ran. Didn't think about direction, didn't care. Just crashed through the underbrush, branches whipping my face, roots trying to trip me. I could hear them behind me, not running because they didn't need to run, just gliding through the forest, moving between trees like water flowing around stones. My lungs burned. My legs screamed. I ran until I couldn't run anymore, until I collapsed against a tree and vomited from exhaustion. When I looked up, they were standing in a semicircle around me, watching, waiting. The faceless one who'd first appeared by the fire stepped forward. It crouched down until its void face was level with mine, and I felt that smile again. Run if you like, it whispered. The forest is ours. Every tree, every shadow, every hollow. You can't escape us here. What do you want? I gasped, tilted its head, considering. Warmth, it said finally. We're so cold, always cold, but you're kind. You burn so hot. We remember when we were warm, when we had faces and names and fires of our own. I'll build you a fire, I said desperately. A real one. I've got matches, kindling. We don't need your fire, it interrupted. We need you. It reached out, and I felt its touch, like ice, like drowning, like every nightmare I'd ever had condensed into physical sensation. My vision started to gray at the edges. My chest felt tight. Couldn't breathe. This was it. This was how I died. But then I remembered something my grandfather had told me, back when I was a kid and afraid of the dark. Old Pennsylvania Dutch wisdom, the kind that gets passed down through generations and sounds like superstition until the moment you need it. Fire protects, iron cuts, and names have power. I still had my knife. Iron. Real iron, not stainless steel. With the last of my strength, I pulled it from my belt and slashed at the void where the thing's face should have been. It shrieked, a sound like wind through a graveyard, like bones breaking, like the death rattle of something that should never have lived. The other figures recoiled, melting back into the shadows. I didn't wait to see if they'd come back. I ran again, this time clutching the knife in front of me like a talisman. I don't know how long I ran. Hours maybe. The forest seemed to shift around me, paths appearing and disappearing, the same trees looming up again and again as if I was running in circles. But eventually, finally, I saw it real light. Not the cold ghost fire of those things, but the warm orange glow of a porch light. A cabin. Civilization. I burst from the tree line and collapsed on the cabin's front porch, pounding on the door. An old man answered, shotgun in hand, eyes wide. Please, I gasped. Something in the forest. Things with no faces. They tried to. He looked past me, into the darkness beyond his porch light, and his expression changed. Not disbelief, recognition. Get inside, he said quietly. Now. I stumbled in, and he slammed the door behind me, throwing 3 separate deadbolts. Only then did he lower the shotgun. "You found the Firekeeper's circle," he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded, still shaking. "You're lucky," he continued, moving to the window and peering out through the curtains. "Most folks who find that place don't find their way out. The forest people, we call them, been here longer than anyone remembers. They keep the old fires burning, and in return—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "In return what?" I demanded. "In return, they take what they need. Warmth, life. The forest gives them shelter, but it can't give them heat. That's what they hunger for, what they steal from anyone foolish enough to accept their hospitality." He made me coffee, let me use his phone to call for help. But before the rangers arrived to escort me out, he gave me one final warning. "Don't come back here. The forest remembers you now. And the forest people, they're patient. They'll wait for you." That was 3 months ago. I haven't been hiking since. Can't even walk past a fire without feeling that cold presence. That sense of being watched by things that wear human shapes but have never been human. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear them. Whispers in the darkness. The rustle of movement in an empty room. And I know that somewhere in the Allegheny National Forest, there's a fire burning in a clearing where no fire should be. Waiting for the next lost soul to stumble upon it. Waiting to steal their warmth. Waiting to bring them into the endless, frozen darkness where the forest people dwell. I moved to Florida last week. Flat land. No forests. No mountains. No shadows. But even here, 1,000 miles from those Pennsylvania woods, I sometimes catch a glimpse of movement at the corner of my eye. A figure standing at the edge of the streetlight's glow. Featureless. Patient. They said the forest remembers. I think they lied. I think the forest people remember. And I think they're coming to collect what I owe them. One way or another, I'm going to pay for the warmth I stole from their fire. I just hope, when they finally come, that it's quick.